Hi, James here from Strummer Design. In this video, I'm recreating my first ever leather project. It's a sheath for my main chef knife, and I'll be using my stitching iron jig to make sure my stitching looks awesome. I first got started with leatherwork because I wanted to make a suitable sheath for my main chef knife. It's a Japanese carbon steel karitsuke. This is my number one tool in the kitchen, and I use it just about every day. The sheath I made years ago was perfectly functional and has served its purpose well. However, the stitching is a bit of a horror show. Yikes. This happened because as a super green leather worker, I did not appreciate the importance of keeping the stitching iron perfectly perpendicular to the workpiece. This is a pretty extreme example of less than perfect stitching. I absolutely did improve freehanding my stitching holes over time, but I still found myself sometimes making mistakes now and then that ruined pieces after hours of work. For this new sheath I'm making today, I'm using my stitching iron jig. This will help me make stitching holes that are perfectly perpendicular to the workpiece and perfectly aligned with my desired stitch line, which will ensure that the stitching looks awesome on both sides of the sheath. Here are some of the primary supplies for this project. There'll be links for some of these items in the description. First, we have this 3 to 4 ounce leather. It's from an excellent supplier called OA Leather Supply. We need 3 pieces that are all an inch or about 25 millimeters wider and longer than the blade of the chef knife. For making marks on the flesh side of leather using templates, I found that these Pica pencils with white lead are really effective. For cutting leather, I often use a heavy-duty Olfa knife with a fresh blade. After gluing and stitching, I use this tool for rolling and tamping to ensure that the glue is set well and the stitches are laying flat. We need stitching irons, and of course we need the leather stitching iron jig. Link in description. And last but not least, we need the chef knife itself, because we're going to use it as a template to make sure that we have a perfect custom fit for the sheath. The first step is to mark an outline of the knife on the flesh side of one of the pieces of leather. You can see how the white leaded pencil makes a nice high contrast line that makes it easy to see when we're cutting it out. The piece that we trace the blade on will become the welt of the sheath. The welt will be sandwiched between the 2 other pieces. Its purpose is to protect the stitching from the knife's blade. Be sure to cut along the inside of the white line so that the resulting space is the exact shape of the knife blade. Now we need to glue the welt to one of the sides. This is where having all 3 pieces being the same size is important. All we need to do is line up the outside edges of the pieces, and then the welt will be glued down in the exact shape of the blade. These little red squares are handy for helping ensure the edges of the leather are flush. Now that the edges are lined up, the fit's looking pretty good. Now we can use the fancy roller tamping tool to ensure that the pieces are adhered all nice and nice. After letting that glue dry for about 30 minutes, we can cut the final shape of the sheath. Using calipers, we'll mark a cut line of about 10 millimeters or about 3/8 of an inch from the inside of the welt. Happily, my particular knife has a couple of perfectly straight edges. This means I can use a ruler to make perfect cuts. The last side is curved, and I'll cut it freehand. Off camera, I rounded over the tip using a washer as a template. To prepare for the final gluing step, we use some 80 grit sandpaper to rough up the welt. We now apply some glue, press the pieces together, use the cool little red square to make sure the bottom pieces are flush, then use the roller tamper to make sure the pieces are firmly adhered. Then we let the glue dry for about 30 minutes. Now we can carefully cut off the excess using a ruler for the straight edges and freehand using the edge of the leather for the curved side. For this tight curve at the end of the sheath, just nibble away with the knife and get it as close as possible. It'll get cleaned up and perfected with a bit of sanding. The little red squares come in handy yet again to help with some sanding to ensure the edges are straight and perpendicular to the finished faces of the workpiece. Using our calipers again, set them to 4 millimeters and then mark a stitch line around the edge of the sheath. We are just about ready to make the stitching holes, but first we need to configure the stitching iron jig. There are 2 things to set up. First, we need to set the jig for the thickness of the leather project. In this case, the total thickness of the sheath is 3 layers of leather. So, we glue up 2 shims using 3 layers of the same leather and use double-sided tape to adhere them to the bottom of the jig. Second, we need to configure the adjustable fence for the 4 millimeter stitch line we just marked on the sheath. With the fence loose, your stitching iron on the jig, and the workpiece up against the fence, slide the body of the jig until the teeth of the stitching iron are directly above and centered on the stitch line. Now tighten the thumb screw to fix the fence in place. The jig is now all set up and locked in for this project. Now we can bump the jig up against the workpiece and our iron will be perfectly positioned to repeatedly make perpendicular sets of holes at a fixed distance from the edge. Let's do that now. The jig removes the guesswork about whether you're holding your iron straight and whether you're placing the teeth on the stitch line consistently for each set of holes. The little red square helps us again. It serves as a pulling block to cleanly remove the stitching iron teeth without distorting the leather. The tight curve at the tip is a bit tricky because the workpiece does not offer enough surface for the jig to rest upon. The solution is simple. Use a couple of tiny shims under the front feet of the jig and an iron with a smaller number of teeth, and you're good to go. The jig works perfectly on the gently curved edge of the piece. Here we can see the nice holes the jig has helped me make. They're straight and consistent on both sides of the workpiece. And now we're ready for some stitching. We'll smooth out the stitches with the roller tamping tool, do some beveling, some final sanding, we'll apply some dye, and then a whole bunch of burnishing, and here's the final product. The Strummer designed stitching iron jig helps you easily make professional-looking stitching by ensuring your stitching holes are perfectly aligned on your stitch line and are exactly the same distance from the edge on both sides of the workpiece. It helps you make higher quality items faster and with less waste. To learn more about this jig and to purchase your own, visit strummerdesign.com. Don't forget to check the description for some of the other tools I used as well. Thanks for watching.